Imagine you've spent your entire life fighting for something simple. Not wealth, not fame, not a statue in a public square with your name carved underneath. Just one idea that the land beneath your people's feet belongs to your people. That the oil pumped from Iranian soil, refined in Iranian facilities by Iranian workers, should benefit Iranians. That's it. That's all Mohammed Mossadegh wanted. And for that, just that, the most powerful governments on earth decided he had to be destroyed. It is the summer of 1953. Mohammed Mossadegh is 71 years old. He has spent decades in Iranian politics. He has been imprisoned before, exiled before. He knows better than almost anyone what power looks like when it turns against you. And yet, sitting in Tehran, he genuinely believes that democracy will protect him, that the Iranian people who love him will protect him, that the rule of law, the thing he has dedicated his life to, will hold. He is wrong. Within 72 hours, paid mobs will be tearing through Tehran streets. His government will collapse. His allies will scatter. And the man that Time magazine named Person of the Year, the man ordinary Iranians called Mosaddegh Aziz, beloved Mossadegh, will be arrested in his pajamas, dragged before a military tribunal, and sentenced to 3 years in prison, followed by house arrest for the rest of his natural life. He will never hold office again. He will die under guard in his own home 14 years later, having never been allowed to leave. And the country he tried to liberate, it will follow a path that reshapes the entire Middle East, a path that, in ways no one fully understood at the time, leads directly to the world we live in today. Here is the question that will sit with you long after this video ends. What do you do when you are completely right, and it destroys you anyway? This is the story of Mohammed Mossadegh, and it begins not with oil. It begins with a boy born into a world of impossible contradictions. To understand Mohammed Mossadegh, you have to understand the Iran he was born into, because it was a country that existed, in many ways, at the pleasure of foreign powers. The year is 1882. Mossadegh enters the world in Tehran, into a family of considerable prestige. His father served as a senior official in the Qajar royal court. His mother was a princess of the Qajar dynasty itself. By birth, he belongs to the world of power and privilege, the kind of family that dines with ministers, that understands from childhood how influence works, who holds it, and what it costs. But even from the drawing rooms of the Iranian elite, the truth is visible to anyone willing to look. Iran, at the turn of the 20th century, is being carved up. To the north, Russia exerts enormous pressure, controlling trade routes, manipulating the Qajar court, stationing troops whenever it suits them. To the south and west, Britain is increasingly dominant, and its interest in Iran is not cultural, not political in any noble sense. It is geological, because beneath the deserts and mountains of southwestern Iran lies something that, by the early 20th century, the British Empire has come to understand as the most valuable substance on earth: oil. In 1901, a British businessman named William Knox Darcy negotiates a concession with the Qajar Shah, a deal that gives him the rights to explore, drill, and extract oil from almost all of Iran for 60 years. The royalty payment to Iran, 16% of net profits, and net profits, as the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, later Anglo-Iranian, later British Petroleum, would define them through creative accounting, would remain mysteriously, perpetually low. Iran had oil. Britain had the oil company. Iranian workers labored in the refineries at Abadan, the largest oil refinery in the world at the time, living in paid a fraction of what their British counterparts earned, barred from the Anglo-Iranian club, the Anglo-Iranian swimming pool, the Anglo-Iranian hospital, on Iranian soil, above Iranian oil. Mossadegh sees all of this. He grows up watching it, and something hardens in him, not into anger exactly, but into a kind of absolute, unshakable conviction that this is wrong, that it is simply, plainly, morally wrong, and that someone must say so clearly, whatever the cost. He goes to Europe to study, Paris, then Neuchâtel in Switzerland, where he earns a doctorate in law. He is one of the first Iranians to earn a European doctorate. He returns to Iran in 1914, not as a revolutionary, not as a firebrand, but as something perhaps more dangerous to the established order. A man with legitimate credentials, genuine legal expertise, and absolutely no patience for the fiction that Iran's relationship with Britain is anything other than subordination dressed as partnership. He enters politics. He serves as governor of a province. He serves in the Iranian parliament, the Majlis. He is elected, removed, exiled, elected again. The Iranian political system of this era is chaotic. The Qajar dynasty collapses. Reza Shah rises. Reza Shah is removed by the British and Soviets in 1941. His son Mohammad Reza takes the throne at 21, young and inexperienced and deeply uncertain of his own authority. Into this uncertainty steps Mossadegh. By the late 1940s, he has become the most popular politician in Iran. Not because he is charismatic in the conventional sense, he is, by most accounts, an unusual public figure. He weeps openly in parliament. He sometimes conducts political business from his bed, claiming ill health, though observers note his energy seems to return reliably when the moment demands it. He is theatrical, emotional, deeply sincere. And Iranians love him for performance and corruption. His emotion reads as honesty. He has one message, and he repeats it everywhere to anyone who will listen. Iran's oil must belong to Iran. He calls it nationalization. Britain calls it theft. And in 1951, the Iranian parliament, swept up in a wave of popular feeling that even the Shah cannot resist, votes to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian oil company. Mossadegh is elected prime minister days later. He is 69 years old. He has waited his entire life for this moment. He has no idea what is coming. The morning after nationalization is announced, the world changes. Not in Tehran, in London. In the paneled offices of the British Foreign Office and the boardrooms of Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, the reaction is not diplomacy. It is fury. Pure, barely concealed imperial fury. The British government immediately begins a campaign to strangle Iran economically. They withdraw their technicians from the Abadan refinery, and without British expertise, the Iranians struggle to keep the vast operation running. They impose a blockade, warning international tanker companies that purchasing Iranian oil would be considered receiving stolen property. One by one, the tankers stop coming. Iranian oil sits in tanks unsold, while the country's revenues collapse. Then Britain takes the case to the International Court of Justice, claiming Iran has violated its agreement. Iran argues the court has no jurisdiction over a sovereign nation's domestic economic decisions. In 1952, the International Court rules in Iran's favor. This is a stunning legal victory. It should have been the turning point. The world's highest court has affirmed what Mossadegh always said, that Iran has the right to its own resources. But Britain does not accept the verdict as final. It simply moves to a different arena. In Washington, British diplomats make their case to the Americans, and here they make a calculation that will prove devastatingly effective. They do not frame Mossadegh as a nationalist. They frame him as a communist. Iran, they argue, is on the brink of falling into the Soviet sphere. If Mossadegh, its oil routes, its strategic depth falls to Moscow. In the anxious early this argument lands like a stone in still water. The CIA begins to listen. Inside Iran, Mossadegh is fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously, and the strain is extraordinary. The economic blockade is working. With oil revenues strangled, the Iranian government cannot pay its civil servants reliably. The bazaar merchants, the backbone of Iranian commerce, Men who had initially supported nationalization grow nervous as the economy contracts. The Shah, young and easily frightened, watches from his palace and does not know which way to move. He publicly supports Mossadegh but privately fears him. A prime minister this popular is, by definition, a threat to a monarchy this fragile. Mossadegh senses the trap closing. He asks Parliament for emergency powers, the ability to govern by decree for 6 months, to push through reforms without the endless obstruction of parliamentary factions backed by foreign money. Parliament grants them. His opponents immediately frame this as authoritarian overreach. He is trying to save Iranian democracy by concentrating power in his own hands. His enemies understand, correctly, that this is a vulnerability they can exploit. Meanwhile, the religious establishment is fracturing. Ayatollah Kashani, a powerful cleric who has been one of Mossadegh's most important allies, begins to pull away. The reasons are complex: personal ambition, disagreement over the pace of reform, pressure from forces opposed to Mossadegh's secular vision. But the practical effect is devastating. Kashani's followers in the street, the religious conservatives who marched for nationalization, are now available to be mobilized against Mossadegh. This is the thing his enemies have been waiting for, a crack in the coalition. Mossadegh knows what is happening. He is not naive. He has spent 50 years in Iranian politics. He understands that the British, the Shah's court, the conservative clerics, and now the Americans are all converging on a single conclusion: he must go. He makes a choice that will define his legacy. He goes to the Iranian people. In a referendum in August 1953, he asks Iranians directly, "Do you support his government?" The result is overwhelming, over 99% in favor. His critics call it a rigged vote. His supporters call it the most honest expression of popular will in Iranian history. The result does not matter. The decision has already been made in London and Washington. Operation Ajax, that is what the CIA calls it. The British call it Operation Boot. The plan is elegant in its cynicism. The goal: manufacture the appearance of popular opposition to Mossadegh, frighten the Shah into signing a decree dismissing him, and use the Iranian military, whose senior officers have been cultivated with American money, to enforce the transition. Kermit Roosevelt Jr., grandson of Theodore Roosevelt, runs the CIA's operation from inside Tehran. His budget, approximately $1 million, a significant sum in 1953. The money flows to newspaper editors who publish anti-Mossadegh stories. It flows to religious figures who denounce him from their pulpits. It flows to gang leaders in Tehran's bazaar who can put angry, paid men in the streets on command. The first attempt on August 15th fails. The Shah signs the decree dismissing Mossadegh. Mossadegh gets word ahead of time, refuses to recognize the decree as legitimate, and the military officers sent to arrest him lose their nerve. The Shah, panicking, flees to Iraq and then to Rome. He actually flees. The King of Iran runs. Mossadegh is jubilant and makes his second and final fatal error. He believes the coup has failed. He believes the worst is over. He relaxes. He does not arrest the CIA's assets. He does not purge the military leadership he knows is compromised. Whether from confidence, from a legalist's reluctance to act without due process, or simply from exhaustion, he does not strike at his enemies while he has the chance. 4 days later, on August 19, 1953, the streets of Tehran fill again. This time the crowds are different, organized, funded, moving with purpose toward government buildings. The military units that were supposed to protect Mossadegh's government stand down or turn or simply vanish. By afternoon, the radio station falls. By evening, the Prime Minister's residence is surrounded. Mossadegh escapes over a back wall in the chaos. He will surrender the next morning. He is 71 years old. He has given his life to one idea, and that idea has just been destroyed, not by argument, not by election, not by any legitimate contest of political will, but by foreign money, paid mobs, and a frightened king. Think about what that moment must have felt like. You have done everything right. You have won in court. You have won at the ballot box. You have the love of your people. And none of it was enough. The military tribunal convenes in November 1953. Mossadegh is charged with treason against the Shah. The charge is, and there is no gentle way to say this, absurd. He was the legally appointed Prime Minister of Iran, acting within the authorities granted him by the Iranian parliament, pursuing a policy, nationalization, that had been voted into law by that same parliament. The court trying him was established by the military government that overthrew him. He knows this. He says so clearly in court. "I am well aware," he tells the tribunal, "that my fate will be decided not by this court but by history." He defends himself brilliantly, so brilliantly that the proceedings become an embarrassment to the new government. He argues, cites law, challenges the court's legitimacy at every turn. His defense turns the tribunal into a platform. International observers note the contradiction. A man being tried for treason is giving the most legally coherent arguments in the room. He is sentenced to 3 years in prison, solitary confinement, then permanent house arrest at his estate in Ahmedabad, a village outside Tehran. He is not permitted to leave. He is not permitted visitors without government approval. His correspondence is monitored. He will live this way for 14 years. Outside his walls, Iran's course is set. The Shah, restored to his throne by American and British intervention, grows increasingly authoritarian. The oil agreement is renegotiated. Iran gets a better share than before, a small acknowledgement that Mossadegh had a point, but the fundamental relationship of foreign control over Iranian resources remains. SAVAK, the Shah's feared secret police, is established with CIA assistance. Political opposition is crushed. The wound left by 1953 does not close. It festers. Inside his house, Mossadegh gardens. He reads. He writes his memoirs. He receives, on the rare occasions it is permitted, the visits of old friends and loyal supporters who make the journey to Ahmedabad, sometimes at considerable personal risk, just to sit with him for an hour. He does not express bitterness, those who visited him said. He expresses grief, a profound, quiet, unperformed grief for what Iran might have been. He is asked more than once whether he regrets what he did, whether he wishes he had been more cautious, whether he thinks the nationalization was worth what it cost. His answer every time is some version of the same thing. Of course it was worth it. What is the alternative? That Iran accepts forever that its resources belong to others. That is not a country. That is a colony with a flag. In 1967, he falls ill. He is 84 years old. He is taken under guard to a Tehran hospital. He never returns to Ahmedabad. He dies on March 5, 1967, still technically under house arrest. The government refuses to allow a public funeral, afraid of what the gathering of Iranians who loved him might become. He is buried at his own prior request, in the house in Ahmedabad where he spent his last years, not in a grand cemetery, not in a national mausoleum, at home under guard where he lived his final decade. The oil he nationalized continues to flow. Here is what the coup of 1953 produced. The Shah, restored to power and knowing he owed his throne to Washington, becomes a reliable American ally, pro-Western, anti-Soviet, strategically crucial to American policy in the Middle East. American weapons, American investment, American political support flow into Iran. The Shah builds hospitals, universities, infrastructure. He launches the White Revolution, a program of modernization including women's suffrage and land reform. And he builds SAVAK, one of the most feared secret police apparatuses in the world. Tens of thousands of Iranians are imprisoned, tortured, executed for political opposition. The middle class grows but is given no political voice. The religious establishment is systematically marginalized and grows angrier, more organized, more radical with each passing year. The wound of 1953 festers not just as memory, but as active political energy. In 1979, 26 years after the coup, that energy erupts. The Iranian Revolution, one of the most consequential political upheavals of the 20th century, sweeps the Shah from power. Among the many rivers of Iranian anger that feed that revolution, one runs directly back to Mossadegh and what was done to him. The conviction, now hardened into certainty, that the West cannot be trusted. That democracy in Iran will always be strangled by foreign interests before it can breathe. That the only protection is absolute, uncompromising separation from Western influence. The revolutionary government that takes power is not what Mossadegh would have wanted. He was secular, democratic, a man of law. The Islamic Republic is none of those things in the way he understood them. But the fuel that fired the revolution, the rage at foreign interference, the determination to control Iran's own destiny, the refusal to be a client state, that fuel was packed into the Iranian psyche on August 19, 1953. Mossadegh did not create that rage. He shared it. And when he was destroyed for sharing it, the rage did not disappear. It went underground, deepened, and eventually became the revolution. In 2013, 60 years after the coup, the CIA formally acknowledged its role in overthrowing Mossadegh. The admission confirmed what Iranians had always known, what the evidence had always shown, what American and British officials had denied for decades. It came 60 years too late to matter to the man himself, but it matters to his legacy. Because here is what Mohammad Mossadegh's story teaches us, not as a historical footnote, but as a living human truth. Being right is not the same as being safe. Being just is not the same as being protected. The most important battles of your life may be ones where every legitimate measure of the contest says you've won, and you lose anyway, because the other side has decided the rules don't apply to them. That is a devastating truth, and there is no comfortable way to dress it up. But here is the other thing his story teaches, and it is perhaps the more important one. What you stand for outlasts what they do to you. The Anglo-Iranian oil company, the company Britain went to such extraordinary lengths to protect, no longer exists under that name. The empire that orchestrated his destruction is gone. The Shah who signed the decree dismissing him died in exile in Egypt in 1980, his dynasty finished, his throne empty. Mossadegh's house in Ahmedabad is a museum. Iranians make pilgrimages there. His face appears on murals. His name is invoked by politicians across the entire spectrum of Iranian politics, because what he represented, the idea that Iran belongs to Iranians, is not an idea that can be imprisoned or exiled or buried in a house on a country estate. He was destroyed. His idea survived. And in the strangest, most painful way, that survival is its own kind of victory, one that he somehow seemed to know was coming, even from inside those walls, even in those long, quiet years of garden and grief and patient waiting. What does that tell us about the relationship between justice and time? What does it mean that a man can be so completely defeated in the short term and so completely vindicated by history? I don't think there's a clean answer, but I think sitting with the question matters, because most of us will never face what Mossadegh faced, but all of us will face moments where doing the right thing costs us something real, where we are correct and it doesn't protect us, where we do everything the right way and the outcome is still wrong. His story asks, what do you hold on to in that moment? What keeps you from becoming bitter? What allows you to tend your garden, write your memoirs, receive your friends, and still believe, even in house arrest, even at 84, that it was worth it? I think for Mossadegh, the answer was this. He never confused his personal outcome with the value of what he stood for. He didn't need to win to know he was right. He didn't need vindication in his lifetime to maintain his dignity in it. That is, perhaps, the hardest and most important thing any of us can learn from him. We began this story with a question. What do you do when you are completely right and it destroys you anyway? Mossadegh spent the last 14 years of his life answering that question, not in speeches, not in court, but in the quiet, daily choice to remain himself, to not become what was done to him, to not let bitterness replace the conviction that had brought him to the center of world history in the first place. He was a man who believed that law matters, that sovereignty matters, that the people of a country have a right to the wealth beneath their own feet. He was not a revolutionary. He was not a radical. He was, in many ways, the most conservative kind of politician imaginable, a man who simply wanted the rules to apply equally to everyone, including the powerful. And the powerful could not allow that. What happened to Mossadegh did not end with him. It echoes in every headline about Iran you have read in your lifetime. The revolution of 1979, the hostage crisis, the nuclear negotiations, the sanctions, all of it carries, somewhere inside it, the ghost of August 19, 1953. That is how consequential one moment can be. That is how long the effects of injustice can travel through time. But here is the thought I want to leave you with, the one that sat with me long after I finished researching his life. Mossadegh never stopped believing that Iran would one day be free and self-determining. He held that belief in prison. He held it under house arrest. He held it when the British and Americans denied everything. He held it at 84 when he was dying in a hospital under guard. Was he right? That's a question Iranians are still living, still answering, still fighting over. But I genuinely wonder, whether the act of holding the belief, refusing to let go of it, was itself the most important thing he did. Not the nationalization, not the legal victories, not even the moral clarity of his position. Just the refusal to stop believing it mattered. If you've ever held onto something that cost you a principle, a relationship, a dream against pressure that told you to let it go, you understand something about what Mossadegh's life was. You understand the exhaustion of it and the strange, stubborn dignity at the center of it. I'd like to know your thoughts. Have you ever held on to something you knew was right, even when the outcome went against you? What did that teach you? Drop a comment below. I read and reply to every single one. And let me know where you're watching from. This story matters everywhere, but it lands differently depending on where you stand in the world. If this story moved you, please like this video and subscribe to Archivist Owl. We release a new story every week, stories about real people who faced impossible moments, and what those moments reveal about all of us. Thank you for being here with